On Friday morning, October 25, 2024, at exactly 9:14 a.m., I was standing in my restoration shop in Bonita Springs, Florida, watching my 9-year-old son Caleb eat cereal on a workbench stool when my phone made a sound I had never heard it make before. The screen lit up with a banking notification from Standard Chartered Bank in London. International wire received. $14 million. I read it 3 times. I looked at my son. I looked at the half-restored 1962 Ferrari 250 GT SWB sitting in my bay, the burnt, abandoned shell I had purchased 10 days earlier for $500 from a woman who told me she was just glad to get the eyesore out of her grandfather's garage. 3 months earlier, I had been a divorced single father, working 60-hour weeks, restoring damaged classic cars in a 2-bay shop and barely covering child support. 10 days earlier, I had paid $500 for what every previous appraiser had certified as a destroyed vehicle. And now an agent representing a member of the Brunei royal family had just transferred more money into my business account than I would have earned in 3 lifetimes of fire investigation work. But here's what I didn't know yet. Standing in my shop on that October morning, the man who had originally falsified the insurance report on that Ferrari 7 years ago, the man who had been waiting patiently to acquire it for himself, had just received word of the $14 million wire transfer at exactly the same time I did. He was already in his car. He was already driving south on I-75 from Fort Myers toward Naples. And before the sun set that day, I would be standing in the parking lot of my son's elementary school with my hand on Caleb's shoulder, looking at a man who had spent 28 years investigating accidents for an insurance company, and had decided, after 7 years of patient waiting, that he was not going to let a former arson investigator from Tampa take what he believed belonged to him. This is the story of how it happened, all of it, from the burnt shell in a Naples garage to the courtroom in Fort Myers where it ended. But to understand any of it, you have to go back 10 days. My name is Daniel Holloway. I'm 42 years old. I run a 2-bay classic car restoration shop on Old 41 Road in Bonita Springs, Florida. I specialize in fire-damaged and flood-damaged vintage vehicles, which is a strange niche, but one that comes from a stranger background. From 2008 to 2018, I worked as an arson investigator for the Tampa Fire Rescue Bureau of Investigations. 10 years of looking at burned cars, burned houses, burned warehouses, and reading what the fire wrote into the metal and wood and drywall. I was good at it. I made detective at 29. I worked 31 homicides, 84 insurance fraud cases, and 4 serial arson investigations. I left in March 2018, 6 weeks after my divorce was finalized. The divorce was civil. My ex-wife, Rebecca, and I had simply run out of marriage. She works as an ER nurse at Naples Community Hospital. We share custody of our son Caleb, 50-50, alternating weeks. The boy turns 10 next July. He has my dark hair and his mother's quiet, observant eyes, and he carries a small brass compass on a leather string his grandfather, my father, dead now 4 years, gave him on his 5th birthday. He carries it everywhere. He doesn't go anywhere without it. When I left investigations, I needed something to do that used my hands and my eyes and didn't require me to look at human remains anymore. I had spent every weekend of my adult life working on old cars, so I opened the shop. The forensic background turned out to be my edge. I could look at a fire-damaged classic that everyone else had written off and read what had actually happened inside the metal. I could tell you in 3 minutes whether the chassis was salvageable, whether the engine block had survived, whether the frame was warped, whether the fire had been long enough and hot enough to compromise structural integrity, or whether it had just burned the paint off and made the car look unsalvageable to anyone who didn't know how to look. That skill made me a small living, not a great one, enough to keep the lights on at the shop, pay child support on time, and keep Caleb in the same clothes the other kids at Naples Park Elementary wore. On Tuesday, October 15, 2024, at 7:42 in the morning, I was sitting at my workbench drinking coffee and scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, which is where half of my acquisitions come from. The listing was buried in the estate sales section. No photographs, just text. Fire damage collector vehicle 1962 Italian make. Sold as scrap, $500 firm, pickup only. Naples, Port Royal neighborhood. Serious inquiries only. Estate liquidation. I read it twice. A 1962 Italian make in Port Royal, the wealthiest zip code in the state of Florida, sold as scrap for $500. In a sane world, that listing was either a scam, a typo, or somebody's idea of a joke. But I had been doing this for 6 years, and I knew that the people who lived in Port Royal sometimes inherited things from grandparents who had bought them 60 years ago for reasons no one in the family currently understood. And sometimes those things sat in garages for decades, and then a hurricane came and an insurance adjuster wrote a report, and the family received a check, and the wreckage stayed exactly where it had always been because nobody had ever decided what to do with it. I texted the number. The response came back in 4 minutes. Available today between 2 and 4 p.m. Address provided upon serious inquiry confirmation. Cash only, as is. No returns. I confirmed I was serious. The address came through, Port Royal Avenue, Naples. I closed up the shop at noon. Caleb was with his mother that week, so I had no school pickup to worry about. I drove down US 41 toward Naples in my 2017 Chevy Silverado with a flatbed trailer hitched behind me. I told myself I was going to look at something that was almost certainly worthless, and that I should not get my hopes up. I should not have told myself anything. The Port Royal estate sat behind a wrought iron gate at the end of a private cul-de-sac, with 8-foot ficus hedges on either end of the driveway, and a Mediterranean revival mansion at the end of it that had to be 8,000 square feet. The kind of house that has its own name. The kind of house where the gardener's truck costs more than most American households make in a year. I parked my Chevy next to a 2024 Range Rover Autobiography. The woman who came out of the front door looked maybe 34. Dark blonde hair pulled back in a clip, linen pants, a simple cream blouse. The kind of effortless wealth that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't have to. Mr. Holloway, Daniel, Charlotte Whitfield, thank you for coming. The garage is around the side. I'll walk you over. I followed her along a flagstone path. She made small talk. As we walked, the polite, distant kind of small talk that wealthy people make with contractors. Her grandfather had passed away in May of 2023. She had been slowly clearing out the estate ever since. The Ferrari, she called it the Ferrari, without affection, the way you would refer to a broken appliance, had been in the garage for years. The insurance company had paid out on it after Hurricane Irma. She just wanted it gone before hurricane season prep started next month. We reached the garage. 6 bays. She opened the third one with a fob. The car was under a blue tarp covered in 7 years of dust. My grandfather bought it in 1994, she said, gesturing at the lump. He paid $480,000 for it, which I'm told was a lot of money for a car at the time. He kept it in this garage for 23 years. He drove it twice. He had a fire in here during Hurricane Irma in 2017. A tree took down a power line. The surge melted half the wiring. The insurance adjuster declared it a total loss, and we got a $1.2 million payout. The wreckage has been sitting under that tarp ever since. She made a small gesture. If you can find something valuable in that pile of melted metal, Mr. Holloway, you can keep every penny. Then she laughed. It was a friendly laugh, not a cruel one. She wasn't being mean. She was being honest. From where she was standing, looking at the dusty tarp covering what she assumed was a destroyed 60-year-old car, the idea that there was anything valuable left under there was genuinely funny. I didn't laugh. I walked over to the tarp, I pulled it back, and I went absolutely still. For the next 11 seconds, I did not move, I did not breathe, I did not blink. I just looked at the car the way I had once looked at 1,000 burned vehicles in 1,000 insurance fraud investigations, and I read what the fire had written into the metal. This is what I saw. The paint was completely destroyed, burned away. The original Rosso Corsa red had been replaced with the black soot pattern of an electrical fire that had moved upward from the engine bay along the wiring harness, scorched the firewall, traveled into the cabin, and consumed the leather interior and the wood dashboard. The fire damage was severe. It was also entirely cosmetic, because I had spent 10 years reading fire patterns, and what I was looking at was an electrical fire, not a consumption fire. The temperature curve had been moderate, high enough to destroy paint, leather, rubber seals, wiring, but nowhere near high enough to compromise structural metal. There was no chassis warping. There was no frame distortion. The engine block was visible through a partially collapsed hood, and I could see immediately that the cast iron was intact. The cylinder heads were intact. The intake manifold was intact. The transaxle was visible from underneath, and it was unblemished. I bent down and looked at the front frame rails. Original factory welds, intact, no thermal degradation. I straightened up and looked at the rear suspension mounts. Intact. I looked at the steering rack housing. Intact. This was not a destroyed car. This was a car that had been parked in a building where an electrical fire had occurred. The fire had destroyed every replaceable component on the vehicle: paint, upholstery, wiring, rubber. It had not touched a single structural component. With proper restoration by a qualified Ferrari Classique specialist, this car could be returned to factory condition. The matching numbers would still match. The provenance would still be intact. The frame and engine would still be original. Then I looked at the small metal plate on the door jamb. Chassis number, 241 GT. I knew that number. Every classic car investigator and every Ferrari authenticator in the world knew that number. It was the chassis number of one of the 165 Ferrari 250 GT short wheelbase Berlinetta Competizione cars produced between 1959 and 1962. They were not the most valuable Ferraris ever made. They were the second most valuable Ferraris ever made, after the 250 GTOs. A pristine 2419 GT in the current market would sell at auction for somewhere between $11 and $14 million. This one, with the right restoration, would be worth every penny of 14. I straightened up slowly. Charlotte Whitfield was watching me with the polite, distant expression of a woman who had not registered that anything significant had just happened. I had a choice to make in that moment, and it was not a small one. I could tell her the truth. I could tell her that her grandfather's Ferrari was not a destroyed total loss, but a fully restorable example of one of the most valuable production cars ever made. I could walk away, and she could call Sotheby's, and the auction proceeds would go entirely to her family. That would have been honest. It would also have been stupid. Because I knew, in the 11 seconds I had spent reading the fire pattern, that this car had been declared a total loss by an insurance adjuster who either did not know how to read fire damage or had deliberately misrepresented what he was looking at. And in 22 years of professional investigation experience, I had never met an insurance adjuster who did not know how to read fire damage on a $480,000 vehicle that he had been assigned to assess in person, which meant somebody had falsified that report. And if somebody had falsified that report, they had falsified it for a reason. And the most likely reason, the reason I would have given in any insurance fraud case I had ever investigated, was that they were planning to acquire the vehicle themselves at the depressed valuation, restore it quietly, and sell it for actual market value. If I walked away and told Charlotte the truth, the falsifier would simply move faster. They would offer to take the wreckage off her hands for a slightly higher price. They would acquire the car. They would do exactly what I was about to do. And Charlotte's family would never see a fraction of what the car was worth. If I bought it at the listed price, took it home, authenticated it, and sold it to a real buyer, and then voluntarily compensated Charlotte for the actual value of what she had sold me, the falsifier would be exposed. The insurance fraud would surface, and Charlotte would receive a fair settlement. It was not a perfect choice, but it was the only one that put the criminal in jail and the money in the right hands. I straightened up. "I'll take it," I said. Charlotte raised one eyebrow. "Really?" "For $500, yes. I think there's enough usable structural metal to make it worth my time as a parts donor." She looked at me for a moment. "You don't think it's restorable?" "Not at this damage level. The frame would have to be rebuilt from scratch." I was lying. I was lying to her face. And the only thing I told myself, while I was doing it, was that I was lying to protect her. That the truth would not stay her truth for long if I told it now, because the man who had falsified the original report was still out there, watching, waiting. "Cash?" she asked. "Cash." I counted out $500 from my wallet. She handed me a folder. Inside was the title, signed and dated, and a bill of sale she had already prepared in case the buyer was serious. I helped Marco, the estate's groundskeeper, push the car onto my flatbed. I drove back to Bonita Springs that evening with a $14 million Ferrari secured on my trailer and a feeling in my chest that I had not felt since the last serial arson case I closed for the Tampa Fire Bureau in early 2018. The feeling that I was now inside someone else's crime scene, and I had less time than I thought to figure out who had built it. The next morning, I started the forensic documentation. This was not restoration work. This was evidence work. I treated the car the way I would have treated any scene I had been called to in my old job. Methodically, photographically, with notes time-stamped to the minute. By noon on October 16, I had confirmed what I had seen in the 11 seconds at the estate. The Ferrari was fully restorable. The chassis was straight. The frame welds were intact. The engine, after I disconnected the burned wiring and pulled the spark plugs, turned freely by hand. The transaxle moved smoothly. Every structural component the original insurance report had described as compromised was in fact completely undamaged. On Wednesday, October 17, I opened the original 2017 insurance claim through the public records portal of the Florida Department of Financial Services. The claim file was 63 pages long. The total loss report had been written by a senior claims adjuster named Vernon Pratt of Coastal Mutual Insurance, based in Fort Myers. I read his report twice. In 10 years of arson investigation work, I had read approximately 1,400 adjuster reports. I had reviewed adjuster reports as part of expert witness work in 17 criminal cases. I knew what a competent total loss report looked like. I knew what an incompetent one looked like. And I knew what a fraudulent one looked like. Vernon Pratt's report was fraudulent. It contained 3 specific scientific falsifications. First, the report claimed thermal distortion of front frame rails consistent with prolonged structural compromise. There was no thermal distortion. The frame rails were intact. I had measured them with calipers that morning. They were within factory specification. Second, the report claimed engine block compromised by sustained thermal exposure, internal castings displaced. The engine block was a 3.0-liter Colombo V12 cast iron. Cast iron engine blocks survive any garage fire intact. They cannot be compromised by thermal exposure at temperatures achievable in an electrical fire scenario. The claim was scientifically impossible. Third, the report contained an incorrect VIN reading. The chassis number on the door jamb was 2419 GT. Vernon Pratt's report listed it as 2491 GT. A simple transposition error, except that 2491 GT happens to be the chassis number of a Ferrari 250 GTE, a completely different model worth approximately 1/10 of what 2419 GT is worth. The transposition would not have been caught in any later authentication review, because the wrong chassis number would have been associated with the wrong lower-valued model, and the discrepancy would have been written off as a 2017 paperwork error. This was not adjuster incompetence. This was a man with 28 years of experience writing a deliberately false report on a 63-page claim. I printed the report. I marked the 3 falsifications in red ink. I put the marked up copy in a folder. I labeled the folder 2017, Whitfield Ferrari, Documented Falsifications. Then I called Irina Pavlova in Miami. Irina was 71 years old, born in Leningrad in 1953. She had emigrated to the United States in 1982 and had spent the next 42 years building a reputation as one of 3 internationally recognized authentication specialists for vintage Ferraris in the Western Hemisphere. She lived in a small condominium in Brickell. She kept no website, did no marketing, and accepted authentication work only by personal referral. I had been introduced to her in 2021 by a Tampa attorney who had used her in a probate dispute over a Ferrari 275 GTB. She had liked me because I asked her 3 questions about engine casting verification that no one had ever asked her before, and because I knew the difference between Pininfarina coachwork and Scaglietti coachwork on site. She answered on the second ring. Daniel, Irina, I need your eyes on a car tomorrow. What kind of car? A 1962 SWB Berlinetta, chassis 2419 GT. There was a pause. Daniel, yes. That car burned. It was declared a total loss. It is in the Ferrari Classiche destroyed vehicle registry. It is in their registry, a falsified insurance report. The car is not destroyed. It is fire damage but fully restorable. The chassis, frame, engine, and drivetrain are all original and intact. I am looking at it right now in my shop. Another pause, longer. How did you acquire it? I bought it for $500 from the estate this past Tuesday. The third pause was the longest. Then Irina said, I will be there tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Do not let anyone else photograph it. Do not post anything online. Do not tell anyone you have it until I have seen it in person. She hung up. I sat in my shop with the phone in my hand for a long time looking at the Ferrari. Irina arrived at 10:54 the next morning, October 18, driving a 2016 Volvo S60 that she had owned for 8 years and refused to replace. She wore a gray cashmere sweater, dark slacks, and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She did not greet me. She walked directly to the car. She spent 4 hours with it. She used a magnifying loupe to examine factory stamps. She crawled underneath with a flashlight and a notebook. She photographed every casting mark, every weld, every chassis number, every component serial number. She made detailed handwritten notes in a small bound book she carried in her purse. At 3:12 in the afternoon, she straightened up. She closed the engine bay carefully. She walked over to where I was waiting at the workbench. Daniel, yes, this car is authentic. All numbers match. The chassis is original. The engine is the original Colombo V12 factory installed. The transaxle is original. The Scaglietti coachwork is original beneath the fire damage. The factory data plate is original and the stamping is genuine. The factory body number on the rear bulkhead is intact and matches the chassis number. And the fire damage. Cosmetic only, as you said. The car requires approximately 18 months of restoration work by a certified Ferrari Classique specialist. Estimated cost, $300,000 to $400,000. Restored, it will exceed factory specification, because the modern reproduction components will be objectively superior to the original 1962 wiring and rubber seals. She paused. Daniel, I have a client. I assumed you would. He is not a buyer. He is a collector who has been searching for this specific chassis number for 11 years. He was outbid on it in 1989, when it sold from the original Italian industrialist family to Charles Whitfield's predecessor owner. He thought it had been destroyed in 2017. He will pay anything I tell him is fair. Who is he? He prefers not to be named. He is represented by an agent based in London. His budget is unlimited. He maintains a private collection of 47 Ferraris in a climate-controlled facility he owns personally. He is a member of the Brunei royal family. I sat down on the stool beside my workbench. What is fair? Restored, $14 million US. Unrestored in its current condition with my authentication and complete provenance documentation, $12 million. The premium difference reflects the buyer's preference to oversee the restoration himself through his preferred Italian workshop. He would pay $12 million for it as it sits. He would pay $14 if you allow me to broker. The additional $2 million covers the certainty of the authentication and the absence of public auction risk. My fee is 6% paid by the buyer, not by you. You receive $14 million net. I sat with that for a moment. Irene, yes. Before we do this, there is a problem I need to solve first. The insurance adjuster who wrote the original total loss report in 2017 falsified that report deliberately. I am going to expose him. The exposure will become public knowledge. It will be in court records. The buyer needs to know this before he wires $14 million to my account, because if he doesn't, the falsified record will eventually surface and complicate his authentication. Irina nodded slowly. You are correct that this is a problem. You are also correct that disclosure is necessary. I will inform the agent. He will inform the principal. The principal will not care, because the principal is interested in the car, not in American insurance fraud cases. But the agent will appreciate the disclosure. There is one more thing, yes. I bought this car for $500 from a woman named Charlotte Whitfield. She did not know what it was. I deliberately concealed its value from her in order to protect the transaction from interference by the adjuster who falsified the original report. When I receive the wire transfer, I am going to voluntarily transfer a substantial portion of the proceeds to her. I want you to know that because I want my reputation in this transaction to be clean. Irina looked at me for a long moment. How much? $4 million. You are giving her $4 million. Yes, you do not legally owe her anything. I know. You are not married to her. You are not related to her. No. And you are giving her $4 million. Yes. Irina Pavlova, who had spent 42 years authenticating the most valuable cars in the world for the wealthiest men alive, looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It took me a moment to recognize it. It was respect. Daniel, yes. Your reputation in this transaction is clean. I will inform the agent today. She left at 4:30 in the afternoon. The agent called me from London at 7:47 that evening. His name was Khalid bin Hassan. He was 48 years old. He spoke English with the careful precision of someone educated at Oxford. He confirmed the buyer's interest, confirmed acceptance of the disclosure regarding the falsified insurance report, and confirmed that the wire transfer would be processed within 7 business days of formal authentication submission. I sent the authentication packet on Monday morning, October 21. As part of standard procedure, Irina submitted the authentication request to Ferrari Classiche in Maranello, which automatically triggered an inquiry to the original 2017 insurance claim file to verify the destroyed vehicle status that was on record. That inquiry generated an internal alert at Coastal Mutual Insurance, routed to the underwriting department, who notified Vernon Pratt as the original adjuster of record. I did not know any of this at the time. I would learn it later. The wire transfer initiated on Thursday, October 24, at 4 p.m. London time. It arrived in my business account at 9:14 a.m. Eastern on Friday, October 25, 2024, which brings us back to where this story started. At 9:16 a.m., I picked up my phone and called Charlotte Whitfield. She answered on the third ring. She sounded distracted. I could hear a meeting in the background. "Mrs. Whitfield, it's Daniel Holloway, the mechanic who bought your grandfather's Ferrari last week." "Daniel." "Yes, is there a problem? I have a few minutes. Could you step somewhere private? I need to tell you something important." There was a pause. I heard her excuse herself from the meeting. I heard a door close. "What is it?" "The Ferrari I bought from you for $500 was not a destroyed vehicle. It was a fire-damaged but fully restorable 1962 Ferrari 250 GT SWB Berlinetta with original matching numbers and complete factory provenance. It was authenticated yesterday morning by an internationally recognized specialist. I sold it this morning, in its current condition, to a private collector represented by a London-based agent. The wire transfer cleared at 9:14 a.m. I received $14 million. The silence on the line lasted 6 seconds. "I'm sorry. I think I misheard you. You didn't. I just received $14 million for the car I bought from you 10 days ago for $500. The silence was longer this time. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the original 2017 insurance total loss report on that car was deliberately falsified by the assigned adjuster, a man named Vernon Pratt. I have documented the falsifications. Your family was paid $1.2 million on a vehicle that should have been declared restorable and sold at auction in 2017 for approximately $10 million. The adjuster falsified the report because he intended to acquire the car himself through your grandfather's eventual estate liquidation. I bought it before he could. You knew this when you bought it from me. I suspected it from the moment I saw the car. I confirmed it within 48 hours. And you didn't tell me." "No, because if I had told you, the adjuster would have moved within 24 hours to acquire it from you himself. He would have offered you $50,000, told you that he was being generous, and you would have accepted because you had no reason not to. The car would have disappeared into his private restoration channel, and you would never have seen a fraction of what it was worth." She was quiet for a long time. "What are you proposing, Mr. Holloway?" "I'm proposing to wire $4 million to your family's foundation account within 24 hours as voluntary restitution. Let me explain the number. Your family lost approximately $10 million in 2017. The difference between what the car was actually worth and what Coastal Mutual paid you. When this case becomes public, you will be able to file a civil action against Coastal Mutual for that difference, and you will likely recover $6 to $7 million through settlement. $4 million from me plus $6 to $7 million from Coastal Mutual makes your family whole for what was stolen from you 7 years ago. I am also proposing to provide the FBI with my documented analysis of Vernon Pratt's 2017 report this afternoon, which will likely lead to criminal charges against him." Another long silence. "Why are you doing this?" "Because my grandfather worked 35 years in Lakeland repairing tractor engines, and he never once cheated a customer. I'm not starting now." The silence stretched for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Charlotte said very quietly, "Mr. Holloway, I would like to come to your shop. This afternoon if possible. I want to see the car. I want to look at the man who just told me what you just told me. I'll be here until 6. I'll be there by 3. She hung up. I set the phone down on the workbench. Caleb was still on the stool, finishing his cereal, watching me. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. Was that a serious phone call?" "Yeah, was it good or bad?" I thought about how to answer. It was the right kind of phone call. Sometimes those are harder than the bad ones. He nodded as if he understood completely, which he didn't, and went back to his cereal. My phone rang again at 11:47 a.m. The number was unfamiliar. Fort Myers area code. Mr. Holloway, yes. My name is Vernon Pratt. I'm a senior claims adjuster at Coastal Mutual Insurance. I believe we have a matter that requires urgent discussion regarding an asset that may have been improperly transferred from a previously insured estate. I stood very still. How did you get this number? Public records, Mr. Holloway. Your business registration. I would like to meet you today. You can come to my shop during business hours. I'm open until 6. I would prefer something more private. A pause. Mr. Holloway, I would strongly encourage you to make time for a private conversation today. I have documentation that I believe will be relevant to your understanding of the transaction you just completed. Mr. Pratt, I have 10 years of arson investigation experience with the Tampa Fire Rescue Bureau of Investigations. I have read your 2017 total loss report on the Whitfield Ferrari. I have documented 3 scientific falsifications in it. I will be submitting that documentation to the FBI Tampa field office this afternoon. So if you have something to say to me, you can say it at my shop, on the record, in front of a camera, or you can wait until a federal agent contacts you. The silence on the line was different this time. It had weight. He hung up without responding. I called Special Agent Maria Castillo at the FBI Tampa field office at 12:14 p.m. She was in a meeting. I left a detailed voicemail. At 2:10 p.m. I left the shop to pick up Caleb from Naples Park Elementary. It was Friday, and his school dismissed at 2:30. I parked in the lot at 2:25. I got out of my truck, and Vernon Pratt was standing 20 feet from me, holding a manila folder waiting. He was 56 years old, shorter than me by 4 inches. Thinning gray hair combed carefully across the top of his head. He was wearing a navy sport coat and khaki pants, and the kind of expensive loafers that adjusters who have been quietly stealing for 2 decades sometimes wear. His hand was shaking. He had chosen to confront me in a parking lot where my 9-year-old son was about to walk out of a school door in 5 minutes. Mr. Holloway, Mr. Pratt, I'd like to show you something. He held out the folder. I did not take it. Pratt, I am going to tell you exactly 2 things. Then you are going to get back in your car, you are going to drive away, and you are never going to come near my son's school again as long as you live. He stared at me. I took 1 step closer. The first thing is this. There is a security camera mounted on the corner of the school building, 60 feet behind you, to your left. It has been recording continuously since I pulled into this lot. Your face is on it. Your license plate is on it. The fact that you chose to approach me in the presence of a minor child in a school parking lot is on it. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement maintains an integrated database of these recordings, and they are subpoenaed by federal investigators on a regular basis. His mouth opened slightly. The second thing is this. At 12:14 this afternoon, I left a voicemail with Special Agent Maria Castillo of the FBI Tampa field office, in which I described in detail the 3 specific scientific falsifications in your 2017 total loss report on chassis 2419 GT. I also described your phone call to me at 11:47 this morning. I am about to describe Ab's encounter to her, with the security footage as corroboration, when she returns my call. You have just added witness intimidation to a federal investigation that, based on 28 years of total loss reports you have signed, is going to take a forensic accounting team approximately 8 months to fully document. I paused. You can drive away now, Mr. Pratt. I would strongly encourage you to do that within the next 10 seconds. He stood there for 4 of those 10 seconds. Then he turned around, got into his car, closed the door very carefully, and drove out of the parking lot. I stood there with my hand on my truck door for a moment, breathing slowly, letting my pulse come back down. At 2:30 p.m., the school bell rang. Caleb came out of the door with his backpack over one shoulder and his brass compass swinging from its leather string in his right hand. He walked across the parking lot to me. He looked up. Yeah, buddy. There was a man here. He's gone now. But he was here. I know. He's not coming back. Was he the right kind of phone call or the bad kind? I thought for a moment. He was the bad kind. But he's not anymore. Caleb considered this. Then he nodded once. He handed me his compass to hold the way he always did when he wanted both hands free for something. He climbed into the passenger seat of the truck. Can we get ice cream? Yeah, buddy. We can get ice cream. Special Agent Maria Castillo returned my call at 4:18 p.m. that afternoon. She listened to my full report. She requested the documentation. I emailed it to her within the hour. By the following Monday, October 28, the FBI Tampa field office had opened a formal investigation into Vernon Pratt and Coastal Mutual Insurance. On Tuesday, November 5, federal agents executed search warrants at Vernon Pratt's office and his home in Cape Coral. They seized 22 years of his personal claim files. On Tuesday, December 3, federal investigators announced that they had identified 14 additional falsified total loss reports filed by Vernon Pratt between 2002 and 2023, involving high-value collector vehicles, classic boats, and a small business inventory claim. The vehicles had been subsequently acquired through estate liquidations by a network of 3 confederates, restored quietly, and resold to international collectors. Total estimated fraud across the 22-year pattern, $47 million. On Tuesday, January 14, 2025, Vernon Pratt was indicted by a federal grand jury in Tampa on 27 counts of wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy. His 3 confederates were indicted alongside him. On Monday, February 10, 2025, Vernon Pratt entered a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to 12 counts in exchange for cooperation testimony against his confederates. He was sentenced to 87 months in federal custody. He was ordered to pay $47 million in restitution, joint and several with his co-defendants. He was permanently barred from the insurance industry. I provided testimony via sworn deposition. I did not need to appear at the sentencing hearing. The $4 million wire to the Whitfield Family Foundation cleared on October 26, 2024, the day after my conversation with Charlotte. Her family subsequently filed a separate civil action against Coastal Mutual Insurance for the actual 2017 value of the Ferrari, less the original payout, less my voluntary restitution. The civil case settled for an additional $6.8 million in March 2025. I kept $10 million from the original wire transfer. I paid off my child support arrears, which had been creeping up over the last 2 years. I paid Rebecca a lump sum equal to 4 years of forward child support because she had been carrying more than her share without complaint, and I owed her that. I paid off the mortgage on the shop. I expanded from 2 bays to 4. I hired a junior restoration apprentice named Owen Reyes, 23 years old, who had been working at a transmission shop in Cape Coral and had wanted to learn vintage Italian cars his whole adult life. I put the rest in a trust for Caleb. He will not have access to it until he turns 30. On a Sunday afternoon in late February 2025, Charlotte Whitfield came to my shop in Bonita Springs for the first time since October. She drove the Range Rover. She wore jeans and a simple cotton sweater. She had a leather-bound book under her arm. I had just finished installing a new transmission in a 1969 Lancia Fulvia. Caleb was at a workbench in the corner, building something out of a Lego pirate ship he had received for his birthday in July. Charlotte stood near the open bay door for a moment, looking around. "This is your whole life. This is most of it. Come in." She came in. She held out the book. "I found this last week when I was going through more of my grandfather's things. It's his personal journal, from 1994. She opened it to a marked page. The handwriting was small, careful, slightly old-fashioned. She read aloud. "Today I bought a Ferrari. The car is 55 years old. It cost more than my first house. My wife thinks I have lost my mind. But I see in this car something that I want my grandchildren to inherit one day. Not the car itself necessarily, the idea of it. The idea that real craftsmanship existed once, that people built things by hand because they cared, and that someone should remember what that looked like when I am gone." She closed the book. "He never gave it to me. He had it sitting in a garage for 23 years. He drove it twice. He never told me what it was, because I think he was waiting until I was old enough to understand." She looked at me. "He never got the chance, Daniel. So maybe in a way, he gave it to someone who actually understood what it was." I did not respond immediately. Caleb walked over from his workbench. He had finished part of the Lego ship. He held it up to show Charlotte. "It has cannons." "It does. My dad's friend Owen helped me figure out the steering." "That's a good friend." Caleb nodded with the seriousness of a 9-year-old who had decided this woman was acceptable. He held out his brass compass. "You can hold this, But you have to give it back. My grandpa gave it to me before he died. Charlotte took the compass the way you take something that matters. She turned it over in her hands. She watched the needle settle. It still works. Yeah, north is over there, he pointed. That's exactly where north is. How did you know? Because the sun came up over there this morning, and the sun comes up in the east, so north is the other way. Charlotte smiled. She handed the compass back to him. Caleb, can I ask you something? Yeah. Do you know what kind of car your dad just sold? He thought about it. He said it was a fancy Italian one. It was the second fanciest one ever made. Caleb considered this seriously. Was it fast? Very fast. 60 years ago, it was one of the fastest cars in the world. Did the person who bought it know how to drive it? He has people who drive his cars for him. Caleb thought about this. That's kind of sad. Charlotte looked at me, then back at Caleb. Yes, she said, it is kind of sad, but the car is going somewhere. It will be taken care of. And your dad did the right thing. Caleb nodded. He went back to his Lego ship. Charlotte stayed for coffee. We sat at the small folding table I keep near the front of the shop. We did not talk about the Ferrari or Vernon Pratt or the $14 million. We talked about Caleb's school, about Charlotte's grandfather, who had built a small hotel in 1962 into a hospitality empire by being one of the few hoteliers on the Florida coast who never lied to a guest about anything. About my shop, about what I was going to do with the 4 new restoration bays I had built. She left at 5:30. She did not ask me out. I did not ask her in. But before she got into the Range Rover, she stopped and turned around. Daniel, yes, most people in your position would have kept the entire $14 million, or moved away, or stopped working. You did none of those things. I have a son who watches everything I do. I'd like him to see a father who did the right thing when no one was watching. She held my eyes for a moment. He's watching, Daniel. He's watching. She got in the car and drove away. Tonight, after Caleb is asleep in his small bedroom upstairs, I will go down to the shop and stand in front of the empty bay where the Ferrari used to be. The Lancia is in there now. A 1969 Fulvia Coupe that belongs to a retired engineer in Marco Island who wants it ready for his 50th wedding anniversary in June. It is not worth $14 million. It is not worth $400,000. It is worth, in the current market, somewhere around $45,000 after restoration. But the man who owns it has been waiting 6 years to drive it again with his wife, and when I deliver it to him in May, I will charge him exactly what I quoted him, and not a dollar more. Because the value of the work I do is not the value of the cars. It is the value of the trust people place in someone who promises to fix something for them, and who keeps that promise without quietly stealing in the dark. That is the lesson my grandfather taught me in a tractor repair shop in Lakeland, Florida, in 1989, when I was 7 years old and asked him why he had quoted a farmer $80 to fix a starter motor when the part itself was $60. He told me, because the labor is $20, Daniel, and if you charge a man $20 for the labor, you can sleep at night. I have been sleeping at night ever since. So here is my question for you. If you had been in that garage in Naples on October 15, looking at a Ferrari nobody else recognized as valuable, would you have told the seller the truth right then? Would you have walked away? Or would you have done what I did, bought it, sold it, and then voluntarily given her a share? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, because the answer says more about who you are than almost any other question I could ask. And if this story made you think about the people in your own life who quietly do the right thing when nobody is watching, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel for more true-to-life stories like this one, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that integrity still exists in the world. Because the best people you will ever meet do not need you to know they are the best people you will ever meet. You just have to watch what they do when they think nobody is looking.